So we've all had problems with pests in our gardens, and I know I have had my fair share as well, and I have actually lost plants to pests like spider mites, which we'll talk about in a moment. But there is one trick that I could have implemented that would have made my grow 10 times better and would have actually saved my favorite plant ever. So it all started with a pink tsunami run from Future Genetics, and you guys all know that plant. It is one of the most amazing buds I have ever had, one of the most amazing genetics I have ever grown. And this plant in particular was the largest, was the juiciest, was the most trichome packed plant I have ever grown up to this point, and it was the plant I was most excited for in my growing career. But that was when I was in my phase of over-fertilization and I was giving my plant too much nutrients, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I was making my plant super green, the buds were turning great colors, and everything was going smoothly until the spider mites decided to hit my plant. And there's one thing I could have done that would have made my plant a lot less vulnerable. And that, my friends, is feeding it less nutrients. But there's a specific type of nutrients to avoid feeding your plant if you want to make it less vulnerable. And that nutrient is nitrogen. Why is nitrogen so bad for these plants later in the flower stage when they're growing their buds? The thing about nitrogen is that it is an actual luxury nutrient, and the plant will uptake it no matter what. If it's there, it will uptake the nutrient nitrogen because it's a luxury item. It's a luxury item and they really like nitrogen, but it's not always good for them. For example, it's basically like a kid having sugar. You give them a little bit of sugar and they'll take the sugar pretty much no matter what. But if you give them too much sugar, it can make the kid weak, it can make them vulnerable, and it can actually affect their immune systems. And the same thing happens with the cannabis plant. But what happens with cannabis plants is a lot different than what happens with children. It actually has to do with the cell structure. If you overfeed nitrogen and you are keeping your plant green all the way down, it's very likely you're feeding your plant too much nitrogen. And what this will do on a cellular level, it will thin the cell walls and actually make them easier to break through for pests, making it a fantastic meal for the spider mites, for the thrips, for whatever you have going on in your garden. So if you are overfeeding nitrogen in late flower and your plants are looking healthy and green, you might want to take the nitrogen back a little, and this mostly applies to synthetic growers, but it can also apply to organics. You don't want to oversaturate nitrogen into your last top dressing because you could have the same detrimental effect. You're going to want to have that be something that isn't super available to the plant. And what this will do is if you actually increase the phosphorus like you need to and lower the nitrogen availability, you will actually create a stronger plant that is less vulnerable to spider mites, and that trick alone could have saved ounces of fireweed. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want more tips and stories on how to grow fantastic weed and how to possibly do it better than even I do, I recommend checking out more videos on my channel. You can hit my icon down below. But until next time, thank you very much.